My name is Stacy, and this is my video out. My name is Stacy Lentz, and I'm a co-owner of the Stonewall Inn and CEO of the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative, and I identify as she and her. I'm kind of an elder lesbian, is what I would like to call myself, I guess. I'm somewhere in the middle of the Stonewall generation and the younger 20-somethings. Having grown up in the middle of a cornfield in a Christian conservative town in Kansas in the 1970s and 80s, I know the difficulty of what it's like to come out in those places. So for me, I've been an activist for a very long time because I can really relate and understand what those people personally go through because I went through it myself. I think the first time I realized I was probably a lesbian, I didn't even know really what the word gay or lesbian or any of that even meant. Especially during that time period, it was a little different. Like there was no TV shows, there was no movies, there was no visibility, there was no role models, there was no one to even tell you what you were just because you happened to like girls or like the person of the same sex, or you're a little bit of a tomboy and wanted to go play baseball with the boys instead of playing dolls with the girls. You didn't know what it meant in those places that were so rural and remote. So for me, I think around 7 or 8, I developed a crush on my best friend, and I started to feel like, wait, everyone doesn't feel this way, especially when I started to get a little bit into the preteen years, if you will. It made me a little bit like, okay, I'm different. Why am I different? But I didn't even have the language. And I don't think a lot of people did in the 70s and 80s that were in places outside of New York, San Francisco, and LA to even know what it was, because we just had no role models and no visibility. I think the first person that I really talked to when I started to figure out I was different was probably when I was in college. I met my first LGBTQ friend. I was not out, but I met somebody who was actually a lesbian. And then having those conversations, I still was like, no, I can't be. No, this doesn't make sense to me. I know I like girls, but I'm not quite like her. I like to wear makeup. I like my feminine side. I like all these things. I don't really approach my life the way that she approaches it. So I can't be gay, right? I just can't be. But of course I was. So having those conversations and dialogue with her kind of helped. And then I actually moved out of Kansas after graduation, and I lived in DC, which was kind of a stepping stone to New York. And living in that kind of city, in that kind of space, even I met straight people that became more my allies as I was learning more about my sexuality. They were there to guide me and reassure me that it was okay, and this was my true self, and it's okay to follow this and this path and just be my authentic self and be comfortable in my own skin. And it took me a very long time to get there because of my own internalized homophobia because of where I grew up. So the first person I told that I was gay in my family was my brother. He was actually super receptive because he left Kansas and went to school on the East Coast. So he had a different mindset and a different kind of culture background, and then just my folks back in rural Kansas. So he was very accepting. It was one of the first times he ever said, I love you and I'll go to mom and dad with you. So that was a tremendous experience. But then when I went to my mom and dad, it wasn't quite the same reaction. I think the first thing my mom said was, well, I always thought the one thing I was good at was being a mom. I guess I was wrong. The next statement, because super religious family that was in church every Sunday, and they're still very active community members of their church, was, well, you're going to hell. Or the third thing was, I just don't want you to have such a hard life. You're going to be made fun of. No one's going to like you. You'll never be considered normal. And I think some of those early interactions actually prompted me to be like, you know what? If she feels this way, I maybe can't change her mind, but I can change the world around her's mind. And I think that really prompted me to want to be an activist because I wanted to show my mom the world doesn't think that way. And maybe I can help change those people who still have those antiquated, different kind of thoughts, that they're on the wrong side of history and they need to get with the program. So since I've moved here to New York, funny enough, I had an amazing career as a recruiter, kind of working on Wall Street and working with accounting and finance, and I was very good at it, but I actually hated my job. And then I was very lucky enough to be able to figure out my true passion, which was really following my activism and putting it into a more formalized process. The opportunity came up to become an investor and help some people buy the Stonewall Inn, and for me, it was the ability to save history. I also wanted the lesbian community to get involved in the aspects of helping save it, because around that time period it kind of be run into the ground and was known as an older gay man's bar, and it historically wasn't being treated or utilized as a vehicle for LGBTQ rights as it should be, with its such an important history. So I was able to do that and really strike out and do some amazing things around marriage equality with some awesome activists, starting in 2011 when we got it passed here in New York, which was incredible for me. And then also getting to work a little bit to help make the park across the street, Stonewall National Monument, with some incredible politicians, some incredible activists, and so many people to name. But I've just had this ability to work on some really major things here in New York, and then formalize the process through my partners at Stonewall, Kurt Kelly, Bill Morgan, and Tony DiCicco, to finalize everything I was kind of doing with them for the past 12 years in the community and form our own nonprofit. Because we really saw a need that there are places throughout the U.S. where it's not so easy to be LGBTQ. Primarily, if you look at the rural areas like where I'm from, or Mississippi, Alabama, even Fairbanks, Alaska, any place outside the coastal bubble cities, they're still struggling. It's like a different animal there. And the battle that started on Christopher Street in 1969, that war's not done, and we're just trying to put boots on the ground in the places where that war continues. I think it's really hard to really pinpoint the most pressing issue against LGBTQ people in the US, because believe it or not, there's actually still so many. And I think that's the biggest problem. People don't realize that. A big pressing one that kind of faces all of us is the fact that you can still be fired for being gay in 28 states. And again, that's something that we could see. The court is already hearing cases on that around the Supreme Court. That's something that we could see either go in our favor by June or not go in our favor by June. And that affects everybody in the LGBTQ umbrella. Another big issue is obviously our trans brothers and sisters. They're totally being left behind, whether it's a trans military ban, trans women of color being murdered. There's so much daily stigma and things that they face. It's a whole nother ballgame for them. And really, we've got to focus on helping them and helping all the others. Our movement needs to kind of just change from just being gay and lesbian to make sure we are including our trans brothers and sisters in a better way forward. I think what gives me the most hope about where we are as a community and maybe some of the changes that we can make, not just here in America, but also globally. You also have to remember on a global level, those 69 countries where it's still criminalized to be LGBTQ. It's a younger generation. I mean, they are fired up. They're so accepting. Anyone kind of under the age, I would say, of like 21. They've grown up with, a whole different environment in terms of like they learn LGBTQ history in some of their schools now. They don't even blink if you talk about being queer. They don't even blink if they have a friend that decided to transition at 16, 17. It's not an issue for them, and I think that they're really here for this fight. They're also really good, and sometimes people miss this, about supporting brands and corporations that only support our community. And they really are about that. As straight allies too, that entire younger generation is really good about putting their money where their mouth is and also going out and doing activism. So the younger generation gives me hope. I think my favorite part about being me is being a mix of where I came from my rural roots and not forgetting that, and then being able to be in New York and adjust and adapt to that. I'm very proud of kind of how I grew up dirt poor in this middle of a cornfield, and now I get to be a part of this huge movement and kind of use Stonewall, one of the biggest things that's happened in our community, as a rally cry, and kind of get to work with people to keep it at the forefront of the gay rights movement. I mean, it's incredible to get to have that responsibility, and I like that I've come back, that I always remember where I came from. We've got to make sure that we're coming together. As political ideologies kind of change and identity politics come into play, we have to make sure that we understand that being queer is something that should unite us no matter what religion, what color of skin, where we're from, those kind of things. And I really feel like our community sometimes has a call out and cancel culture on each other, and we really need to fix that. If we don't unite and remember that 90% of the population of the global, world, 90% of the population still doesn't really appreciate us or want us to exist, there's no way that we're going to win this fight without coming together a little bit better. And I think we have to remember that, and remember that we're all on the same team, and that most of us are leading from a place of intention and in a good way, even if we don't have the language to explain that. And a lot of times the older generation doesn't. Instead of calling out and canceling, we need to make sure that we're educating and teaching them to evolve.